A girl with no face, a man covered in fur, and someone growing bark-like skin. You'll see them all very soon. There are rare moments when nature throws out the rulebook. Jesus Chui Fajardo Aceves, known around the world as the Wolf Man, was one of those moments. His entire face and most of his body were covered in thick, dark hair. At a glance, people weren't sure whether they were looking at a man or a creature from myth. He became the center of legends, stories, and TV specials, but the truth behind his appearance is deeply rooted in biology. Hypertrichosis, also called werewolf syndrome, is an incredibly rare genetic condition that causes abnormal hair growth. Not just in the usual places, but everywhere. Face, ears, hands, even eyelids. And we're not talking about light fuzz. This is thick, dark hair growing where it normally never should. Scientists believe it's a genetic glitch, possibly an ancient switch being flipped back on, something our distant ancestors might have carried in their DNA. What makes Jesus's case even more striking is how symmetrical and full the hair growth was. Unlike patchy or uneven patterns in some other medical conditions, his face was almost perfectly masked in fur. When he smiled or spoke, it looked surreal, like a wolf had started talking. This isn't just about hair though. People with hypertrichosis often end up in the spotlight, whether they want to or not. In the past, many were forced into circus sideshows or freak exhibitions, but Jesus changed that. He embraced his appearance and leaned into it, starring in films, television, and even being featured in the Guinness World Records. He became a cultural icon, showing that what some see as monstrous can actually be mesmerizing. And while hypertrichosis doesn't give you claws or fangs, it challenges everything we think we know about what's normal. Mandy Sellers never expected that one of her legs would keep growing while the rest of her body stayed average. By her late 20s, her left leg had become so massive and heavy, she could barely support its weight. At one point, it measured over 40 inches around and weighed more than 90 pounds. This wasn't a tumor or swelling, it was something far more complex. A genetic disorder so rare that it took doctors years to give it a name: Proteus syndrome. This condition causes uncontrolled, asymmetric growth in bones, skin, and other tissues. But it doesn't affect the whole body, only certain parts mutate. That's what makes it so strange. One arm might grow longer than the other. One foot could become unrecognizably large. In Mandy's case, her leg became so enlarged that it looked sculpted out of stone. She needed custom-made shoes, wheelchairs, and specially modified clothing just to move through daily life. At first, doctors suspected she might have something similar to what Joseph Merrick, known worldwide as the Elephant Man, had. His story is a mystery in itself, one we'll come back to later. Mandy's case proved even more unusual. After her leg was amputated due to complications, it began growing again, not just a little, rapid, measurable growth. That's when researchers discovered she had a mutation in a gene called PIK3CA. Not Proteus exactly, but something closely related. They had been looking in the wrong place the entire time. This mutation activates signals that tell cells to grow when they shouldn't. In Mandy's case, it was mostly her leg. In others, it could be the spine, the skull, or even internal organs. What's terrifying isn't just the size, it's the unpredictability. You never know which part will transform next. Watching Mandy walk or stand was like watching someone defy biology. But while Proteus reshapes the body from the inside, there's another disorder that transforms the skin itself, turning it into something that looks almost botanical. Epidermodysplasia verruciformis, also called tree man syndrome, causes massive wart-like growths that resemble pieces of bark or coral erupting from the skin. These growths can become so dense and rough that they turn hands into what looks like tree roots, spreading across the fingers and hardening with time. This condition is linked to an extreme sensitivity to the human papillomavirus, not the kind that causes common warts, but a rare strain that spirals out of control in people with this genetic mutation. The virus activates abnormal growth in keratin, the protein that makes up your hair, nails, and outer skin, and creates rough, layered clusters that just keep building. In the most severe cases, people develop pounds of growths on their hands and feet, locking fingers into stiff, bark-covered shapes. One of the most famous cases was that of a man from Bangladesh, whose hands weighed more than 11 pounds in total due to the sheer volume of lesions. Surgeons attempted removal, but the growths returned, sometimes more aggressively than before. This is the kind of condition that doesn't just change how a person looks, it changes how they can live. Everyday actions like holding a fork or tying a shoelace become nearly impossible. There's no supernatural cause here. No ancient curse or jungle virus, just a rare immune disorder that turns the body's own skin into something it was never meant to be. And yet, when you see it, it doesn't feel medical. It feels mythical, like something out of a forest legend. There's a man who can pull the skin of his neck over half his face, stretch the skin on his stomach like pizza dough, and twist his limbs in ways that make you look twice. His name is Gary Turner, and for years he held the Guinness World Record for the stretchiest skin on Earth. What gives him that almost alien flexibility is a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a rare connective tissue disorder that weakens collagen, the protein that holds skin, joints, and blood vessels together. In Gary's case, this means his skin is so elastic, he can stretch it nearly 6 inches without pain. He can fold it, wrap it, even shape it into strange forms. But Ehlers-Danlos doesn't stop at just stretchiness. Some with the condition can dislocate their joints at will, bend their fingers backward, or twist their arms like rubber tubing. It's as if the internal architecture that keeps our bodies tight and in place just isn't doing its job. The condition comes in several forms, and not all of them are as visually dramatic as Gary's. Some types cause fragile blood vessels or hypermobility without skin effects. But in its classic form, EDS can turn someone into what looks like a real-life contortionist. No stage tricks, no illusions, just skin that behaves unlike anything you've ever seen. There's a fine line between what looks like a sideshow talent and what is actually a rare genetic anomaly that rewrites how the human body holds itself together. There are people walking among us whose bodies have taken growth to another level. Not just tall, not just big, but something else entirely. In cases of acromegaly and gigantism, the human form expands in ways that almost seem engineered. These two related conditions both stem from the same issue, an overproduction of growth hormone. The difference lies in timing. When the hormone surge happens during childhood, bones grow longer and taller. When it begins in adulthood, it thickens features. The jaw becomes broader, hands and feet enlarge, and the forehead and brow take on a heavier shape. One of the most striking signs is the size of the hands. In advanced cases, the palms become so large and the fingers so thick that ordinary gloves no longer fit. Joints become more prominent, grip strength increases, voices often drop into a low, booming register, and even the skull reshapes over time. The body isn't just growing, it's rebuilding itself layer by layer under the command of a hormonal imbalance that doesn't know when to stop. Despite the visual impact, many cases begin subtly. Shoes no longer fit quite right. Rings become tight. Over the years, these changes stack until the person in the mirror looks like someone else entirely. Broader, denser, even heavier, but with a kind of raw power. Some who develop the condition early have been known to lift enormous weight without formal training. It's not the polished physique of a bodybuilder, it's something rougher, more elemental. A kind of strength that looks accidental but feels absolute. Medical scans show bones that have thickened dramatically, and joints that have adapted under constant internal pressure. The cause is usually a small, non-cancerous growth in the pituitary gland, located at the base of the brain. This tiny gland controls some of the body's biggest systems, and when it misfires, the result is a person who looks like they've stepped out of myth. Some conditions don't just alter the body, they redefine the very surface of it. Harlequin ichthyosis is one of the most severe and visually dramatic skin disorders known to medicine. At birth, those with this condition are covered in thick, armor-like scales that crack and split, giving the impression of skin that's melting or breaking apart. The effect is immediate and unforgettable. The plates form deep red fissures and jagged patterns, almost as if the skin is trying to rebuild itself in layers but doesn't quite know how. This disorder is caused by a mutation in a gene responsible for regulating the skin's natural barrier. In people with Harlequin ichthyosis, the skin cells multiply far too quickly, and instead of shedding off, they harden and pile up into thick, diamond-shaped scales. These scales restrict movement, distort facial features, and even pull back the eyelids and lips, giving the face an intense, mask-like appearance that many associate with horror films. But this isn't fiction. Even simple things like blinking or flexing a hand can become a challenge. The skin is dry, tight, and inflexible, forcing the body to operate beneath a rigid shell. Over time, with intensive care, some of the scaling can soften, and many patients grow into forms that are less extreme. But the disorder never fully disappears. It continues beneath the surface, constantly pushing the skin to harden and flake. In many cases, the body overcompensates, producing even more skin than needed. When people see this condition for the first time, it's often described in terms of science fiction, as if the skin is trying to become something inhuman. And yet, beneath that extreme outer layer is a perfectly regular person, navigating a body that's constantly trying to reshape itself. It's one of the rarest genetic disorders in the world, but visually, it might be the most unforgettable. They were known as the Blue People of Kentucky, and they were real. For generations, a small group of people in the Appalachian region lived with skin that was tinted a striking shade of blue. Not from paint, not from exposure, but from a rare genetic condition called methemoglobinemia. This disorder affects how blood carries oxygen, causing the skin to take on a bluish or purplish hue. The deeper the tint, the less oxygen the blood can deliver to the tissues, but surprisingly, many of these individuals lived long, active lives. The science behind it is specific. In healthy people, the iron in hemoglobin helps transport oxygen throughout the body. In methemoglobinemia, that iron changes state, making it harder for hemoglobin to release oxygen. The result is blood that appears chocolate brown and skin that appears blue. It looks dramatic, almost alien, but it isn't life-threatening if managed properly. Stories about the blue fugate spread beyond Kentucky. Some believed it was folklore or exaggerated tales, but blood tests confirmed the condition. Even today, rare cases of the mutation still appear, often in people who share ancestry with the original family. There's no pain, no fever, just skin that looks like it belongs to another world. When you see someone with it, the first reaction is disbelief. But what you're seeing is the result of a tiny genetic shift that changes the color of life itself. Joseph Merrick is one of the most visually remembered figures in medical history. Known to the world as the Elephant Man, his extreme physical appearance made him a subject of both public fascination and scientific debate for over a century. Though for many years his condition remained a mystery, modern researchers now believe Merrick most likely had neurofibromatosis type 1, a genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow along nerves throughout the body and leads to severe disfigurement in rare cases. Neurofibromatosis type 1, or NF1, can appear in a variety of ways, from small skin tumors to massive growths that reshape the skull, spine, and limbs. In Joseph Merrick's case, the effects were extreme: a large, overgrown skull, thickened skin, and bony protrusions that warped the structure of his face and body. He also developed scoliosis and had trouble walking, not because of muscle weakness, but because his skeleton had grown in the wrong directions. Photos and preserved casts of his body show how radically the disease transformed him over time. The condition stems from a mutation in a gene responsible for controlling cell growth. With NF1, that control breaks down, and nerve cells start to multiply and form benign tumors called neurofibromas. In some people, these are just small bumps. In others, like Merrick, they grow large and deep beneath the skin, pressing against bones and organs and causing structural changes that continue for life. Merrick's case remains one of the most iconic examples, not just for its severity, but for the way it shaped public perception of physical difference. In his lifetime, he was exhibited in sideshows and misunderstood by many. Today, he's remembered through both medical journals and films, and his story continues to shed light on how rare disorders like NF1 can profoundly alter the human body. What once seemed like myth or exaggeration is now grounded in genetics, a reminder that real conditions can look stranger than anything fiction ever dreamed up. There are conditions that twist, stretch, or scar the body. And then there's one that turns it into something close to stone. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP, is among the rarest disorders known to science. It causes muscle, ligaments, and connective tissue to slowly transform into bone. Once the process starts, it can't be reversed. A simple bump or bruise can spark the body's repair system to misfire, building new bone where it doesn't belong. The result is a second skeleton forming inside the first. Over time, joints become locked, arms freeze in place, necks stop turning, and rib cages lose their ability to expand. People with FOP can become so restricted that they're unable to sit down, raise their arms, or open their mouths more than a few millimeters. Even medical procedures are risky. Surgeries intended to remove extra bone can cause the body to create even more. The cause is a mutation in the ACVR1 gene, which controls bone growth. In FOP, this gene becomes hyperactive, reading injury signals as instructions to build bone. even where it never existed before. The process usually begins in childhood, starting at the neck and shoulders before progressing down the body. It's not random, the pattern is disturbingly consistent. Cases are so rare, only a few hundred known globally, that many doctors go their entire careers without seeing a single patient. And because the condition is so specific, it's often misdiagnosed early on. But for those who have it, every movement carries the risk of permanent change. The body hardens over time, not by choice but by code, a genetic script running silently in the background, rewriting flesh into bone. It's a condition that turns the ordinary act of moving into a disappearing privilege, and the human form into something almost fossilized while still alive. There are kids who are born looking like they've already been training for years, with defined biceps, thick legs, and abdominal muscles you wouldn't expect to see on anyone under the age of 10. This isn't the result of some extreme workout program or special diet. It's the effect of a rare genetic mutation that blocks a protein called myostatin, which normally limits how much muscle the body can grow. Without it, the body builds muscle rapidly and naturally, resulting in real-life super strength from early childhood. A few documented cases have stunned doctors around the world. One young boy was able to perform pull-ups and move heavy objects when he was barely out of preschool. His muscle definition was so pronounced that scans showed nearly double the muscle mass of other children his age, and all without stepping foot in a gym. Another child in Europe carried a similar mutation and developed a body structure closer to a trained adult athlete than a typical adolescent. These children aren't just strong, they're biologically different, growing muscle as if their bodies are stuck in power mode. The mutation behind this is incredibly rare. It has to be inherited from both parents, and even then, the expression can vary. In animal testing, breeds like Belgian blue cattle, which naturally lack myostatin, grow to massive sizes with almost no fat. When the same mutation occurs in humans, the result is muscle growth that looks artificial but is entirely natural. What makes these cases even more fascinating is how functional the muscle remains. It's not just for show. These individuals typically have enhanced strength, stamina, and speed, almost like their muscles are biologically optimized. Unlike some disorders that weaken the body, this one seems to boost its power without the usual trade-offs. Juliana Wetmore's face didn't fully form before she was born. In fact, when doctors delivered her, nearly 40% of the bones normally present in a human face were missing. Her eyes were in place, but her cheeks, jaw, nasal passages, and much of her skull structure had failed to develop. To anyone seeing her for the first time, it looked like something was terribly wrong, as if her face had been erased. But what Juliana has is a real genetic condition called Treacher Collins syndrome, and it affects around 1 in 50,000 people. This syndrome disrupts the development of facial bones and tissues during early pregnancy. It doesn't affect intelligence or brain function, but the physical differences are profound. Children born with Treacher Collins often have underdeveloped cheekbones, very small jaws, and little to no outer ears. In more severe cases like Juliana's, breathing, hearing, and even eating become complex tasks that require surgical intervention from a very early age. Juliana underwent her first surgery before she was 1 year old, and that was just the beginning. Over time, she would need dozens of operations to rebuild parts of her face, including bone grafts, skin adjustments, and airway reconstruction. Even with medical support, the condition remains visually extreme. People with Treacher Collins often develop their own ways of communicating, hearing through bone conduction devices, or using technology to assist with speech. Despite how different she looks, Juliana's mind and personality are like any other teenagers. She enjoys music, spending time with her family, and learning at school. But her condition has made her globally recognized as the girl born without a face, a phrase that captures the shock of seeing her, but misses the deeper story of resilience, biology, and adaptation. There's a rare disorder that blurs the line between medical reality and ancient myth, one that's been whispered about in connection with vampire legends for centuries. It's called Porphyria, and it affects the way the body produces heme, a crucial component of hemoglobin. When this process goes wrong, it can result in extreme light sensitivity, skin lesions, and in some cases facial disfigurement and dental changes. Symptoms that eerily resemble the characteristics often linked to vampires in folklore. The most dramatic form of this condition is cutaneous porphyria, where sunlight exposure causes the skin to blister, scar, and tighten. Over time, repeated sun damage can leave the skin leathery and stretched, particularly around the lips and nose. In severe cases, the ears and fingers can become eroded. Individuals with this condition often avoid daylight altogether, not by choice, but because even brief exposure can lead to burning pain and permanent injury. There are several types of porphyria, and each presents in a different way. Some attack the skin, others the nervous system, causing confusion, seizures, or even hallucinations. The cause is genetic, though certain environmental triggers, like specific foods, medications, or hormonal changes, can intensify symptoms. It's not contagious, and it doesn't involve drinking blood despite the old rumors, but it can feel like living under permanent restriction from the outside world. Michel Lotito became famous around the world for eating the unthinkable: bicycles, glass, razor blades, even parts of an airplane. Diagnosed with a rare eating condition called pica, Lotito didn't just chew metal, he digested it. His stomach lining was reportedly twice as thick as normal, and he claimed to feel no pain after swallowing sharp or heavy objects. Over the years, he consumed nearly 9 tons of non-food materials, not in secret but in public, under medical observation. While Lotito is the most extreme and documented case, he's not the only one. Other individuals with pica have been known to crave chalk, rubber, hair, coins, and even rocks. The condition often starts in childhood and can vary in intensity. But Lotito's version remains unique, a man whose body seemed built to do what no one else could: process solid metal like it was cereal. His story isn't folklore. X-rays, doctors, and years of records confirmed it, and it left behind a question that still puzzles science. How far can the human body go when it decides the rules no longer apply? Mickey Rourke once had the kind of face that casting directors dream about. With a chiseled jawline, intense eyes, and a brooding charisma, he wasn't just a movie star, he was a Hollywood icon. But by the time the 2000s rolled around, the Mickey Rourke that fans remembered was almost unrecognizable. It all started after he stepped away from acting to chase a career in professional boxing. In the ring, he suffered multiple facial injuries, broken cheekbones, a smashed nose, and torn skin that needed stitching more than once. To fix the damage, Rourke turned to cosmetic surgery, but instead of returning to his old look, the procedures only pushed him further away from it. He's been honest about the number of surgeries he's had. According to Rourke himself, some of the operations were done to repair his face after fights, but the results didn't go as planned. He mentioned having at least 5 surgeries on his nose alone, and 1 on his cheekbone. His face changed shape in ways fans couldn't ignore. What once looked naturally strong and masculine began to appear tight and artificial. The softness and expression that once helped him light up a screen were suddenly gone. Photos of him in the early 2000s sparked a wave of confusion and concern. People wondered what had happened to the Hollywood heartthrob. Some fans didn't even recognize him in his comeback film The Wrestler, where ironically he delivered one of the best performances of his career. The contrast between his raw acting and his altered appearance made the role even more powerful and tragic. Rourke has said he didn't go to the best surgeon the first time around. In his words, he chose the wrong person to put his face back together. The results pushed him down a path of repeated corrections, trying to fix what had already been done. It's a story that mixes ambition, physical pain, and the pressure of fame. What makes Mickey Rourke's case so interesting isn't just the visual change, it's how open he's been about it all. Unlike many celebrities who stay quiet or deny ever going under the knife, Rourke has told his story without sugarcoating it. He didn't hide the fact that his appearance was the result of surgeries, some of them corrective, others cosmetic. And that honesty has gained him a different kind of respect. Michael Jackson's evolution wasn't just musical, it was physical, and the world watched it happen step by step. In the early days with the Jackson 5, he had a wide smile, round cheeks, and a soft, youthful face. By the time Thriller hit the charts, things had already started to change. His nose looked slimmer, his skin noticeably lighter, and that was just the beginning. Over the years, Jackson's appearance shifted dramatically. His nose became thinner, almost skeletal. His jawline and chin sharpened, eyebrows arched higher. Even the shape of his eyes appeared different. He never confirmed all the surgeries, but experts and fans alike speculated about rhinoplasty, cheek implants, a cleft chin implant, eyelid surgery, and more. One of the most noticeable changes was his skin tone. Jackson revealed he had vitiligo, a condition that causes patches of skin to lose pigment. To even out the tone, he reportedly used creams and possibly underwent treatments to lighten the rest of his skin. That only added more fuel to the rumors and made his transformation even more mysterious to the public. In interviews, Jackson insisted he only had 2 nose jobs. But photos across the decades told a more complex story. The once soft features had been replaced by a delicate, near-sculpted look that felt almost artificial. Some doctors suggested his nasal surgeries had been pushed too far, leaving little structure to support the nose. Still, what kept people glued to Michael's transformation was how tied it was to his art. His appearance became part of the performance. Every new album came with a new look. Some fans saw it as reinvention, others felt like they were watching someone disappear behind a mask. Whatever your take, Michael Jackson's story remains one of the most watched and speculated transformations in modern pop culture. Toby Sheldon wasn't a global pop star, he wasn't even a performer, but he became famous for one very specific reason: his obsession with looking like Justin Bieber. A songwriter by trade, Toby spent years and more than $100,000 on plastic surgery to match the face of the teen idol. He started small, a little Botox, some fillers. Then came a series of more dramatic procedures: lip lifts, hair implants, eye surgery, skin smoothing, and even a modified jawline. His cheeks were reshaped, his smile altered, and his hairline redesigned. He wanted the youthful, smooth, baby-faced image Bieber had in his early fame. In photos taken throughout the years, the progression is clear. With each procedure, Toby's own features faded a bit more. The transformation wasn't subtle, it was striking. In the end, he looked more like a wax figure than a pop star. He'd taken inspiration to an extreme that most people couldn't quite believe. What made Toby's story stand out wasn't just the surgeries, it was the level of detail he pursued. He studied Justin's expressions, haircuts, and face angles. He brought photos to his surgeons and made requests that were oddly specific. His journey even landed him on reality TV, where audiences were shocked by how far he had gone. There's something almost eerie about the lengths he went to copy someone else's identity. It sparked conversations about body image, fame, and how far someone might go to feel seen. Toby Sheldon wasn't a household name, but his transformation was impossible to ignore. It showed what can happen when admiration turns into obsession, and how the search for perfection can reshape a person entirely. Jocelyn Wildenstein left behind one of the most talked-about legacies in the world of plastic surgery. Known worldwide as the Catwoman, she became an icon of transformation, someone whose appearance sparked curiosity, fascination, and endless conversation. But behind the headlines and tabloid nicknames was a woman with a story that ran deeper than just procedures and photos. Jocelyn was once a stunning figure in New York's high society. After marrying billionaire art dealer Alec Wildenstein, she lived a life of luxury and glamour. That's where her surgical journey began. Reportedly, she started altering her face to appeal to her husband's love of big cats. Over the years, her appearance became more feline: lifted eyes, exaggerated cheekbones, fuller lips, and a jawline that seemed sculpted with intention. She never denied her unique look and in fact defended it boldly. Jocelyn often said she felt beautiful, denying that she ever went too far. She insisted she hadn't had nearly as much work done as people claimed. To her, the face in the mirror was exactly how she wanted to look. Her transformation was so distinctive that she became a cultural figure far beyond fashion and society circles. People referenced her look in magazines, documentaries, and pop culture. Her name was instantly recognizable, even to those who didn't know her personal story. What made Jocelyn different was her confidence. She didn't hide from cameras, she walked red carpets, she smiled for interviews, and she never let public opinion dictate how she felt about herself. Pete Burns wasn't just a pop star, he was a shockwave. As the frontman of Dead or Alive, he made waves with his eccentric style and unforgettable hit You Spin Me Round. But over time, the music became only part of his identity. His ever-changing appearance began to draw just as much attention as his songs. Burns was fearless with his look. He mixed fashion, gender expression, and bold beauty choices long before it was mainstream. But as the years passed, his cosmetic procedures grew more frequent and intense. Lip injections, cheek implants, nose reshaping, and facial fillers became part of his routine. What started as artistic expression slowly turned into something more complicated. He was open about it too. Burns admitted on television to undergoing dozens of procedures. He said he was chasing his vision of beauty, but also repairing damage from surgeries that didn't go as planned. At one point he suffered a severe infection in his lips after a procedure gone wrong, requiring major reconstruction and multiple corrective surgeries. Photos show a dramatic evolution. In earlier years, Pete had a punk rock edge. Later, his face looked smoother, more stretched, almost synthetic. Yet despite public criticism, he leaned into his style completely. He saw his body as art, a work always in progress. Pete's story is intense but not cruel. He was someone who believed in transformation and didn't apologize for how far he went. His health complications were serious, but his commitment to being fully himself never faded. That's what made him unforgettable. Not just the surgeries, but the defiance that came with them. The Bogdanoff twins weren't just TV personalities, they were enigmas. Igor and Grichka Bogdanoff were known in France for their science fiction shows and academic work, but their appearances soon became a bigger topic than any show they hosted. Once considered handsome and sharp-featured, the twins slowly morphed into something that felt almost out of this world. Their faces began changing dramatically in the early 2000s. Their cheeks ballooned, their jaws squared, and their lips swelled. At first they denied having cosmetic surgery, attributing the changes to superior genetics and aging, but as their look became more exaggerated, speculation exploded. Their angular faces and stretched skin had people everywhere wondering what they were doing behind closed doors. Doctors and fans alike believed the twins underwent multiple rounds of cheek and chin implants, lip fillers, and possibly even brow lifts. The result was a look that felt more like science fiction than reality, fitting for two men who spent their lives exploring the future on TV. What made their story even more curious was how synchronized their changes were. They always looked almost identical, even as their features became more sculpted. It was as if they weren't just modifying their own faces, they were curating a shared identity. Despite the jokes and memes that followed them online, Igor and Grichka remained proud of who they had become. They made public appearances, spoke at conferences, and continued to share their scientific theories. They never flinched, never hid. Whether you found their look confusing or fascinating, you couldn't look away. The Bogdanoffs had become living examples of how far someone can go to chase a unique aesthetic, and do it in perfect symmetry. Donatella Versace isn't just a name, she's a brand. As the face of the Versace empire after the tragic loss of her brother Gianni, she became the living embodiment of high fashion, bold, glamorous, and unforgettable. But over time her physical appearance began to spark almost as much conversation as the designs she sent down the runway. In early photos, Donatella had classic Italian beauty, soft features, strong cheekbones, and natural confidence. As the years passed, however, her face began to change noticeably. Her skin grew tighter, her lips fuller, and her eyes more narrow. Her once subtle features were replaced with a dramatically sculpted look that made her almost unrecognizable compared to her younger self. She's never been one to go into detail about the work she's had done, but many believe she's had Botox, facial fillers, lip enhancements, and possibly multiple facelifts. Her deep tan and platinum blonde hair added to her signature image, a powerful, unapologetic woman who stood out in every room she entered. What makes Donatella's transformation so fascinating is how seamlessly it fits into the world she built. In a fashion industry obsessed with appearance, she turned her own look into a symbol of excess, edge, and total control. Whether people admired her for it or questioned it, she remained untouched by public opinion. Donatella Versace didn't just wear fashion, she became a walking piece of it. And even as her face changed over time, her confidence never wavered. She took ownership of her appearance the same way she took charge of an empire, fearlessly and completely on her own terms. Courteney Cox was once the fresh-faced star of Friends, with her expressive eyes and girl-next-door charm making her a fan favorite. As the years went by though, Courteney, like many stars, felt the pressure of aging under a constant spotlight. To keep that youthful glow, she turned to facial fillers. But over time she realized the look she was chasing started to pull her further from herself. She didn't try to hide it. Courteney has been open in interviews about her use of fillers and how it gradually went too far. Each small injection seemed harmless, just a little tweak here and there. But the accumulation over time made her face feel unfamiliar, even to her. Her cheeks became overly plump, her eyes lost their natural shape, and the subtleties of her expressions started to fade. Fans noticed, the media buzzed. And eventually, Courteney stepped back and made a decision not many celebrities talk about. She had the fillers dissolved. That move marked a turning point. She admitted that she had been chasing a version of beauty that didn't actually feel right. She missed the way her face moved, the way her real features looked, and just like that she shifted from chasing perfection to embracing natural aging. What sets Courteney's story apart is the honesty. She didn't wait until things spiraled out of control. She stopped, looked in the mirror, and chose to hit reset. It's rare in Hollywood, and it's exactly why people listened. Now, with fewer cosmetic enhancements, she's reconnected with her original look, and with fans who appreciate the openness. Courtney's journey is proof that it's never too late to change direction, even in a world obsessed with looking young forever. When Lil Kim first hit the scene in the 90s, she was bold, unapologetic, and instantly iconic. Her fashion pushed boundaries, her lyrics broke rules, and her look was fierce and original. But as her career continued, her appearance began to shift. Gradually at first, then more dramatically. Fans started to notice changes in her skin tone, nose shape, and facial structure. Over time, her cheeks appeared fuller, her lips more defined, and her eyes more lifted. Her jawline changed, and her face took on a new silhouette entirely. Many believed she had undergone rhinoplasty, skin-lightening treatments, cheek implants, and other cosmetic enhancements. Lil Kim didn't openly confirm all the details, but the transformation was impossible to miss. Her new look sparked endless debate. Some saw it as a loss of her original style, while others viewed it as a powerful reinvention. But underneath the public chatter, her choices told a deeper story. One about identity, fame, and the intense pressure placed on women in the spotlight. Lil Kim had spoken before about feeling overlooked and judged by the industry, about the beauty standards she felt pushed to meet. Her transformation wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about power, control, and survival in a world that often isn't kind to women who break the mold. Even today, her face remains one of the most talked about examples of celebrity surgery. But behind that conversation is a reminder of how fame can shape not only your career, but the very way you see yourself. Lil Kim didn't just change her look, she reshaped the conversation about what beauty means in an industry that demands constant reinvention. She started out as a popular online model, flawless skin, perfect curves, and a face that fans couldn't stop talking about. Her look was her brand, and plastic surgery became part of her image. Each change brought her closer to the doll-like perfection she admired. But one final procedure didn't go as planned. The transformation that once built her fame suddenly became the reason for her fall. In just days, her reflection turned into something she didn't recognize. This is a story of beauty, ambition, and how quickly it can all change. Elsa Patton wasn't a typical reality star. She didn't blend in, she stood out. Known as Mama Elsa from The Real Housewives of Miami, she became a fan favorite for her wild one-liners, spiritual talk, and unforgettable face. But long before she appeared on TV, Elsa had already undergone several facial surgeries that drastically altered her appearance. She admitted to getting plastic surgery years earlier, hoping to preserve her looks. But something went wrong along the way. Her cheeks looked overly filled, her skin stretched, and her expressions frozen. It wasn't subtle, and that's exactly what made her so memorable. Fans were fascinated not just by her personality but by how different she looked from other women her age. Despite the dramatic results, Elsa carried herself with confidence. She joked about her look and rarely took herself too seriously. Her transformation became part of her charm, even when viewers were shocked by how far it had gone. In many ways, she helped define a new kind of reality TV character, one who didn't apologize for standing out. Her appearance sparked a lot of curiosity, but her attitude kept people watching. She owned every inch of her transformation, even if it didn't turn out as planned. Elsa Patton became a symbol of extreme cosmetic change, but also a reminder that personality can shine through anything, even the most unexpected face. Amanda Lepore doesn't just turn heads, she stops traffic. Known worldwide for her ultra-feminine, doll-like appearance, she transformed her body into a living artwork. With a background in nightlife and modeling, Amanda became a fashion icon through self-invention, pushing the boundaries of beauty into surreal territory. Her transformation began early. She transitioned in her teens and later pursued dozens of procedures, multiple breast augmentations, buttock enhancements, rib reshaping, and extensive facial work. Her lips are oversized and glossy, her waist tightly cinched, her skin porcelain smooth. It's a look that's both glamorous and otherworldly, entirely her own creation. Amanda never hid the work she had done. In fact, she embraced it. Her extreme aesthetic wasn't about fitting in, it was about standing out. She wanted to look like a cartoon, a fantasy, a sculpture in motion, and she achieved exactly that. People didn't just see her, they stared, they wondered, they remembered. While some called it excessive, Amanda called it art. She built a career out of being unlike anyone else. Her transformation is one of the most dramatic in celebrity history, but it's also one of the most intentional. Every inch of her appearance was carefully crafted, and every look she served told the same story. This is beauty on her own terms. Janice Dickinson was once hailed as the world's first supermodel. With her fierce walk and unforgettable bone structure, she ruled the runways and magazine covers of the 1970s and 80s. But in the decades that followed, her face began to change, and the headlines followed. She spoke candidly about her cosmetic procedures, including facelifts, Botox, breast implants, and more. Her goal was to stay youthful in an industry obsessed with age. But as time passed, her features became more refined, more sculpted, and eventually more frozen. The expressive face that once sold thousands of fashion covers looked increasingly stiff on camera. Janice didn't try to hide it. She joked about her surgeries on reality shows and spoke openly about regrets. At one point, she even removed her implants and encouraged others to think twice before making changes. Her honesty made her more relatable, even as her look became more distant from the natural beauty she once flaunted. What makes her story compelling isn't just the transformation, it's the roller coaster behind it. From modeling legend to reality TV wildcard, Janice Dickinson's appearance tells the story of someone trying to keep up with time, and sometimes outrun it. Her journey through plastic surgery is both a cautionary tale and a window into the pressure women in the spotlight often face. Katie Price has never been shy about change. From glamour modeling to reality shows, she's built an entire career on reinvention, and her face and body have changed along the way. In fact, she's one of the most openly modified celebrities in the UK, with dozens of procedures under her belt, from breast augmentations to facelifts, lip fillers, veneers, and more. Her first surgery, a breast enhancement, catapulted her into tabloid fame. From there, it snowballed. She's admitted to having multiple nose jobs, eye lifts, Brazilian butt lifts, and rounds of Botox and filler. At times, even her fans couldn't keep track of how many changes she had made. Each new appearance sparked a wave of attention. Sometimes praise, sometimes concern. What makes Katie's story unique is her openness. She talks about her surgeries publicly, sometimes even filming the process for her YouTube channel. She's been candid about the pain, the complications, and even the regrets. Priscilla Presley's beauty was once considered timeless. As Elvis Presley's former wife, her striking looks and mysterious charm made her a quiet icon in Hollywood. For years, she appeared graceful and composed, seemingly untouched by time. But in the 2000s, her appearance took an unexpected turn, and it wasn't by choice. In one of the most shocking cases in celebrity surgery history, Priscilla became the victim of an unlicensed doctor who injected her face with industrial-grade silicone, claiming it was a miracle anti-wrinkle treatment. The substance wasn't approved for cosmetic use and had been smuggled in from Argentina. The procedure caused visible lumps, scarring, and long-term changes to her appearance. After the truth came out, the media frenzy was intense, but Priscilla handled it with dignity. She never made a spectacle of it. Instead, she quietly sought corrective treatments and stepped away from the spotlight for a time. Her face had changed, but she didn't let the experience define her. Over the years, her public appearances showed a slow but noticeable shift. Her features remained elegant, but the earlier softness of her look had been replaced by a tighter, more structured appearance. Robert Wadlow wasn't just tall, he was colossal. Standing at an unbelievable 8 feet 11 inches, he remains the tallest human ever recorded. Born in 1918 in Alton, Illinois, Robert's height wasn't obvious at first, but by the time he was 5 years old, he was already taller than most grown men. His growth never slowed down, driven by a condition called gigantism, which caused his pituitary gland to release way too much growth hormone. By age 8, he was wearing clothes meant for adults and shaking hands with celebrities. At 13, he towered over his teachers. His size was so extreme that he needed custom-made shoes that were over 18 inches long. Everything about Robert was larger than life. He had a soft voice, a gentle presence, and never let his size stop him from living fully. He loved reading, photography, and even joined the Boy Scouts, with a tent and sleeping bag specially made just for him. Despite needing leg braces and constant medical care, Robert traveled the country with the Ringling Brothers and later with a shoe company that sponsored him. He greeted crowds, took pictures with fans, and became a symbol of strength and uniqueness. People weren't just amazed by his height, they were drawn to his calm and kind personality. Photos from the time show him next to average-height adults who barely reach his waist. The contrast is jaw-dropping, and it's no wonder people couldn't believe their eyes when they met him in person. Even today, people still visit his statue in Alton, marveling at how someone like him could really exist. His story is unforgettable, not just because of how tall he was, but because of how he lived that height with grace. At first glance, people thought they were seeing a miracle. A living, breathing woman with no head. Betty Lou Williams was known across sideshows as the Headless Girl, and the illusion was so convincing it stopped crowds in their tracks. Born in 1932, Betty had a rare medical condition that left her body severely deformed. But what made her famous wasn't just the condition itself, it was how it was presented. She was placed inside a carefully designed setup, with mirrors, lighting, and machinery that made her appear alive, headless, and unexplainably still conscious. Her torso would move, her chest would rise and fall, and her limbs would shift slightly, giving the effect of a decapitated but very much alive person. Behind the scenes, Betty was fully in control. She worked inside the rig for hours a day and reportedly earned a solid income doing it. The illusion was terrifying and fascinating. Doctors came to examine it, children stared in disbelief, and it became one of the most talked about acts in sideshow history. Betty wasn't just a part of the show. She was the show. Her stillness, timing, and awareness turned a medical condition into a living performance. Even now, vintage photos of the act still confuse people who swear it couldn't be real. Leonard Trask didn't start life as a spectacle. Born in 1805 in Maine, he lived a simple, working-class life, until a horse-riding accident in his 20s changed everything. His spine was permanently damaged, but the condition kept getting worse. Over time, his back twisted further until he couldn't stand upright. His chin was locked close to his chest, and he had to walk bent almost completely forward. He could no longer work, couldn't lift his head, and suffered constant pain. Most would have disappeared into poverty. Leonard did the opposite. He documented his condition, sold copies of his own autobiography, and even posed for photographs. His story spread through newspapers not because of pity, but because of how visibly unusual his condition was. People couldn't believe that someone could survive in that state, let alone travel and promote their own image. Trask eventually became known as the Wonderful Invalid. He turned his body into a message, not for sympathy but as proof of human endurance. The twisted posture, the locked joints, the unmistakable silhouette, his appearance became iconic. He wasn't a performer, but people were still drawn to him. His portrait remains one of the most bizarre and haunting examples of real physical transformation recorded on camera in the 19th century. Zaro Aga stood out before he even spoke. Deep-set eyes, a long white beard, and a presence that felt ancient. Born in Turkey sometime in the 1700s, or so he claimed, Zaro said he lived to be 160 years old. Whether the number is accurate or not, his story created a sensation. He told reporters he'd met Napoleon, served in multiple wars, and even traveled the world late into his life. The man didn't just age, he multiplied history. He appeared in newspapers across Europe, and the US photos show a thin man with heavily wrinkled skin, standing upright, alert, and conversational. Doctors examined him. Debates followed. No one could fully confirm or disprove his age, but the image of a man that old, still moving and talking, was enough to spark international attention. Zaro didn't live quietly. He gave interviews, met celebrities, and posed proudly in traditional robes. Whether he was 160 or simply very old, the fascination was real. He became a global curiosity not because of records but because of presence, the kind that made people stop and stare, wondering how someone could walk through so many eras and still be here. They appeared out of nowhere. Two children, green-skinned, speaking no known language, wearing clothes that didn't match anything locals had seen. This wasn't modern times, it was 12th century England, in the quiet village of Woolpit. The children said they came from a place with no sun, a world of permanent twilight. That's all they could explain. The boy died young, but the girl survived. As she learned English, she said they got lost underground before stumbling into the surface world. No one could find where they came from, and no one had ever seen skin like theirs. Some believed they were sick. Others thought they were aliens or travelers from a hidden civilization. Over time, the green tint faded, but the legend didn't. Paintings, books, and even modern theories still chase the origin of the green children. They weren't ghosts. They weren't monsters. They were real kids who didn't fit into anything the people of that time understood. And centuries later, we still don't have a clear answer. Julia Gnus didn't just have tattoos, she became a walking mural. Known as the most tattooed woman in the world, over 95% of her body was covered in vibrant ink. What made her story more than just colorful skin was how it started. Julia was diagnosed with a rare skin condition that caused her to blister severely when exposed to sunlight. She chose tattoos not just for expression, but as a way to take control of something that had once controlled her. Dragons, castles, movie scenes, portraits. Her body became a canvas of art and survival. She didn't hide from the world, she stood out in it. Julia appeared on TV and documentaries and even in Guinness World Records. People would stare, ask questions, sometimes even doubt it was real. But every inch was carefully crafted, every line a decision. Her presence was intense but not overwhelming. She had a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from turning pain into power. Julia Noose wasn't just tattooed, she was layered with stories, all told in ink and all visible with just a glance. In the quiet roads of western Pennsylvania, a strange figure once walked alone at night. His face was barely a face at all, no eyes, no nose, a twisted mouth. People called him the Green Man. Others whispered his real name, Raymond Robinson. As a child, he climbed a power line and was struck with thousands of volts. The shock left him permanently disfigured. He survived, but his injuries were severe. His facial features destroyed. The damage was so extreme that he avoided going out during the day. Instead, he walked the streets at night, often for miles, completely in silence. Local teenagers began to notice him and gave him the nickname Charlie No Face. Some claimed he glowed, others said he wasn't human. But the truth was simple. Raymond was a real man, living with unthinkable scars, and trying to find peace. Those who dared speak to him discovered he was kind, soft-spoken, even funny. He liked Coca-Cola and didn't mind being approached. The legend made him a monster. But Raymond never did anything monstrous. He became a ghost story by accident, a real man, walking in the dark, misunderstood by almost everyone who passed him. She had no arms, no legs, but Violetta didn't sit in the shadows, she took center stage. Born Aloysia Wagner in Germany, she had a rare condition called tetra amelia, meaning she was born without all four limbs. Most people would assume a life of silence and stillness followed. Violetta proved them all wrong. She became a traveling performer, not just an exhibit but a star. She appeared in sideshows across Europe and America, carried with dignity and framed in grace. In every photo, her posture is upright, her head is held high, she signed autographs using her mouth, she spoke confidently to curious visitors, and most of all, she redefined what people thought was possible. Spectators came expecting pity. They left stunned by her elegance and control. She didn't hide behind curtains or play up shock. She wore elegant dresses, posed for portraits, and challenged the standards of what beauty and ability looked like. Her presence was so strong that even decades later her images stopped people mid-scroll. Her body may have been missing limbs, but nothing about her was small. Violetta didn't need arms to hold attention. She did it just by being exactly who she was. Before she was even a teenager, Josephine Boisdechaine had grown a thick, dark beard, longer than most grown men's. Instead of being hidden or ridiculed by her family, she was embraced and given the stage name Madame Clofulia. Born in Geneva in 1827, she had a condition that caused her to grow a full beard by age 8. At first, she was simply a curiosity, but her striking look, part Victorian lady, part full-bearded gentleman, made her famous. Her beard grew over 6 inches long, and she would part it, curl it, and sometimes even tie ribbons in it. By the time she joined P.T. Barnum's American Museum in New York, she had already toured half of Europe. But her fame didn't just come from her appearance. She carried herself like royalty. In gowns, corsets, and jewelry, she took photos that looked more like portraits of nobility than sideshow flyers. People came expecting to gawk. Instead, they found themselves admiring her confidence, her poise, her undeniable beauty. Clofulia wasn't trying to prove anything. She was simply being seen, and she made sure the world saw her the way she chose to be remembered. He couldn't speak. He didn't recognize his own name. He walked on all fours and refused to wear clothes. When hunters discovered him in the woods of Germany in 1725, Peter the Wild Boy didn't look like someone raised by humans. He was filthy, barefoot, and survived by eating raw plants and whatever he could find. The King of England heard the story and brought Peter to court, not to be studied, but to be shown off. He became a living mystery. Was he raised by animals? Had he escaped from somewhere? No one ever figured it out. He never learned to speak more than a few basic words. He never explained his past, but he became famous across Europe. Artists painted his image. Royals brought him to parties. People wanted to see the boy who didn't belong. Peter's green eyes, wild hair, and awkward movements fascinated the public. He lived well into adulthood under royal care, walking in circles endlessly, still untamed. Some believe he may have had Pitt-Hopkins syndrome, a condition unknown at the time, but even with today's knowledge, his early life remains unsolved. He didn't speak, but he made the world listen. He stood just 29 inches tall, but George Washington Morrison Nutt had the confidence of someone 10 times his size. On stage, he was known as Commodore Nutt, a performer who shared the spotlight with P.T. Barnum's top star, General Tom Thumb. But Nutt wasn't just a sidekick. He had charisma, timing, and the rare ability to win over crowds instantly. He danced, sang, and posed proudly in military-style outfits, complete with gold-trimmed jackets and tall boots. His performances weren't just about size, they were about presence. Barnum recognized that, and turned Nutt into a household name. He performed for President Lincoln, toured Europe, and appeared in grand parades beside Tom Thumb, who he actually didn't get along with off stage. That rivalry only made things more interesting. Fans picked favorites. Newspapers followed every detail. And Nutt, always in uniform, became a living symbol of confidence and charm packed into a tiny frame. He didn't ride fame quietly, he embraced it. Whether standing beside giants or royalty, he held his ground and smiled for the camera. Commodore Nutt proved that performance wasn't about stature. It was about style, and he had plenty of it. Jean Libera didn't just share the stage, he shared his body. Born in 1884 in Italy, Jean had one of the rarest physical conditions ever documented, a parasitic twin named Jacques, permanently attached to his abdomen. Jacques had a partially formed face, shoulder, and arm, not a complete person but enough to be seen, enough to move slightly. Doctors were fascinated, crowds were stunned. Jean wasn't just a man, he was two bodies in one, fused together in a way that seemed impossible. He lived a full life, touring across Europe and the United States, performing in medical exhibitions and circus shows. He would stand on stage, shirtless, calmly presenting the motionless form of his twin. It wasn't violent, it wasn't dramatic, it was eerie. Jacques never spoke, never reacted, but he was visible in every photo. Jean, despite carrying an extra life on his stomach, lived into his 30s and stayed in good health. The condition is almost never seen today. Surgeons can usually remove parasitic twins in infancy. But back then, Jean lived with his brother's body his entire life. He didn't just show up and shock people, he became one of the most unforgettable human anomalies of his century. In 1877, a teenage girl named Rosa Matilda Richter stepped into a cannon. Not for a photo, but for launch. She was just 14 years old, performing under the name Zazel, and she became the first person in history to be shot from a cannon as part of a live show. The act was terrifying even in theory. But Zazel made it real. She climbed into a spring-powered cannon in front of a roaring audience at the Royal Aquarium in London, and was fired through the air, landing in a safety net. No tricks, no illusions, just physics, courage, and spectacle. Her small size and acrobatic skill made her the perfect fit. She didn't just fly once, she repeated the stunt hundreds of times, traveling with circuses and attracting huge crowds. People couldn't look away. They had never seen a human move through the air like that without injury. And for a long time, they only saw it from her. Eventually, injuries from the force of the landings caught up with her and she retired. But the image of a young girl being blasted into the sky became part of circus legend. Zazel didn't just fly, she launched a whole new kind of performance. Martin Van Buren Bates wasn't just tall, he was enormous in every direction. Born in Kentucky in 1837, he grew rapidly from childhood and reached a staggering height of nearly 8 feet. But it wasn't only his height that turned heads. His build was massive. At over 470 pounds, he was strong, broad-shouldered, and towered above nearly everyone he met. Despite his size, he lived a surprisingly active life. He served as a Confederate officer during the Civil War, where soldiers nicknamed him the Giant of the South. After the war, he joined a traveling show and toured the country as a living marvel. But it was his marriage that made headlines around the world. He married Anna Haining Bates, another true giant, who stood over 7 feet 11 inches tall. Their wedding was a public event. Their custom-made bed was nearly 10 feet long and 8 feet wide. Thousands came to see them. Photographers documented their quiet, dignified expressions. They weren't circus caricatures, they were a couple living a very real, very large life. Tragically, both of their children died shortly after birth, likely due to complications related to size. Still, Martin lived into his 70s, far longer than most people with gigantism. His portrait remains one of the most striking in 19th century photography, a man so tall that even full-grown adults barely reached his waist. Ann Bevan was once a nurse, a mother of 4, and known in her community for her kindness and hard work. But after developing acromegaly in her 30s, her body began to change rapidly. Her jaw thickened, her forehead grew, and her facial features became distorted. The disease, caused by excess growth hormone, didn't just alter her appearance, it changed the course of her life. After her husband died, Ann struggled to support her family. When she saw an ad for an ugliest woman contest, she entered not for attention but for survival. She won. From there she joined a sideshow billed under that cruel title. But behind the posters was a smart, sharp-witted woman who used her role to earn a living and secure her children's future. Photos show her face clearly changed by her condition, but what they don't show is the grit behind her decision. Ann never stopped working. She appeared at fairs, on postcards, and eventually at Coney Island. People stared, but she kept going. She didn't let the title define her. What made her truly unusual wasn't her appearance. It was her choice to face the world head-on, even when it stared back. Tom Wiggins was born into slavery in Georgia in 1849, blind, nonverbal, and presumed to be mentally disabled. No one expected him to function, let alone perform. But before he turned 5, he was playing the piano with extraordinary skill. He didn't just play songs. He recreated entire pieces after hearing them once. By 8, he was composing his own music. Audiences couldn't believe what they were hearing. A blind black child who couldn't speak yet could sit at a piano and perform with the precision of a trained master. He became known as Blind Tom, and by the age of 10, he was touring the country, playing for sold-out crowds. Some doubted it was real. But time after time he delivered, mimicking complex pieces, imitating sounds, playing multiple songs in different styles, even creating thunderstorms and train noises using only piano keys. His memory was nearly photographic. He could recite long speeches after hearing them once. Crowds called him a genius, others called him a phenomenon. He didn't need to speak. His music said everything. Though he never gained independence and remained under guardianship his entire life, Tom Wiggins left behind a legacy that still stuns pianists and historians. He wasn't just rare, he was one of a kind. Sarah Biffin was born in England in 1784 without arms or hands. In an era when people with disabilities were hidden or ignored, she became a respected artist, known for her precise, detailed miniature portraits, all painted using her mouth. At a young age she was exhibited at fairs as a curiosity. But what caught people's attention wasn't just her physical condition. It was what she could do in spite of it. She wrote, sewed, drew, and painted, using specially designed tools she held between her teeth. Her ability to create lifelike portraits on tiny ivory surfaces amazed everyone who saw her work. Critics thought it had to be a trick, but she demonstrated her skill live, proving it was real. Her breakthrough came when the Earl of Morton noticed her talent and funded her formal art education at the Royal Academy. Soon, Sarah was taking commissions from the British elite, including members of the royal family. Her signature appeared in the corner of delicate watercolors, created with a brush no bigger than a pin, all guided by movements of her lips, neck, and jaw. She became a full-time artist, not a sideshow performer. Her work still exists today, carefully preserved in museums and collections. Sarah Biffin didn't just overcome the limitations of her body, she mastered a craft many with full ability never achieve, and she did it with nothing but fierce precision and pure will. Joseph Borulaski was barely over 3 feet tall, but everything else about him was larger than life. Born in 1739 in Poland, he was well-educated, well-mannered, and fiercely intelligent. Unlike many little people of his time who were forced into degrading performances, Joseph chose a different path. He embraced nobility. Dressed in fine clothes and speaking multiple languages, he toured the royal courts of Europe, not as a spectacle, but as a guest. He played music, debated politics, and charmed queens and emperors. Wherever he went, he left an impression. He wasn't carried or hidden. He walked into rooms with confidence and left with admirers. He wrote a memoir, ran in aristocratic circles, and became known not as a curiosity, but as a gentleman. In an age where physical difference often meant social exclusion, Joseph turned his stature into a symbol of uniqueness rather than limitation. He lived to be nearly 100 years old, outliving many of the royals who once applauded him. Today, a life-size statue of him stands in Durham, England, not tucked away in a museum corner but proudly displayed in public. He wasn't a circus act or an oddity. He was Count Borulaski, a rare example of someone who defied every expectation history had for him. Joseph Borulaski stood small in stature but tall in legacy. Just like every rare soul in this video. From giants to cannonballs, their stories prove one truth: extraordinary is real. That's about it. Write in the comments which of these people impressed you the most. For more useful information, watch other videos.